I'm a former Democrat supporter, mainly because of John F. Kennedy and the health care issues that occur in our nation. Military blunders. Democrat because all they wanted to do was endanger our military personnel after World War II. The military personnel intentionally dropped the ball because they refused to care. Because of this, the Democrats also want to remove the civil rights to bear arms. Both situations will live in infant intern conflict in disrespect of all military personnel who served in the secondary authority role, commanders and chiefs, which disgrace the lower chain of command's careers and integrity by the upper chain of command by ignoring them due to our nation ignoring the lower chain of command's suggestions. Withdrawal Afghanistan and Iraq. Because of the outcome it has caused amongst our nation, as it did in the wars following World War II, our nation has ignored the previous lower-ranking personnel who said the same thing. If we don't listen to this individual that we have trained would become our enemy, every necessary me. The national security also must be challenged for dishonorable discharging lower chain of command for using social media. Up nation already faces politically. However, in turn John F. Kennedy's Navy would give Kennedy more insight and treat its lower level personnel when trying to give information and intelligence gathering. Unlike our current situation now based upon Thailand and all these other countries and Japan included, our ally countries, I wonder if our nation's national security allows our citizens to commit suicide. The New Age Vietnam by democratic national security has occurred within the nation so many times, which in turn has caused deaths of our nation's military personnel in those senior ranking officers under or assigned by the chief and commander as military advisors, and the nation should be held accountable. National security wants to punish the lower chain of command for using all forms of communication to challenge the national security decisions on withdrawing its personnel. Nation's national security under the Democratic Party has 100 recreated the feelings of our veterans who fought in Vietnam now because the Democrats have cut funding to national security internally and externally and allowed prisoners to go free that have murder, sexual assault, drugs and other charges. Dean citizens with criminal records the right to continue with criminal activity. Our Democrat Party has no regard for military standards for protocol, even though its standards for health care are excellent, but in the opposite, endangering our national security by allowing open borders and more worried about public opinion war conflict within his nation. Our Democrat Party now has caused its demise within our nation. It does not follow the integrity and respect that John F. Kennedy and all the Kennedy's families have instilled in our nation. Our national security already fails when it doesn't listen to its lower chain of command. All the other nations on the Communist Party already use social media propaganda against our nation. Our nation's behavior towards our military personnel is the same way as what occurred when we evacuated Vietnam. Political agendas. Remember the 1944 D-Day, Pearl Harbor, 9/11 Twin Tower. Our nation's security is at risk not from our personnel refusing to listen to our personnel in endangering those who must conduct the orders, both for those who died in the inappropriate withdrawal of Iraq and Afghanistan. The chain of command illustrates his proper steps to challenge the upper chain of command and national security protocol with the withdrawal and endangerment that withdrawal could cause within our nation. After the fact, the Democratic Party also must be held accountable for endangering our civil rights to bear arms and allowing citizens with criminal records to get weapons without question, endangering our nationals for cutting funding to police officers to ensure our protection and civil rights in our state. The leaders are tired of war. They refuse to support their lower chain of command with the evacuation procedures, which has endangered all personnel. The nation should challenge our national security personnel and authority by taking them to the Supreme Court and demanding that they hold people for endangering our military troops for not listening to the lower chain of command and not upholding those who challenge the upper chain command. There are many reasons, but one is the need for a better commander than our current chief, and the military is inappropriately using their authority towards the lower chain of command. There were so many cues to our national security which could have prevented 9/11 way back in the early 70s and 80s. We trained our enemy, yet our national security wants to punish our lower chain command. They have now caused another new age Vietnam because of the actions of our nation and nationals. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party is a disgrace to our nation because of the senators and current president's criminal activities. Watergate scenario, as there was the last time, only reverse our national security advisors and the chief commander of our nation should hold the higher chain of command responsible, listening before situations occurring again. We had too much pride not to say now must bear arms to ensure the security of our own families. We will listen. The situation occurs too much on the Democrat side when the withdrawal was already correct. Our nation did not evacuate our personnel correctly. Democrat Party blunder. Charges against the Democratic Party and House and Senate due to its inadequate knowledge of paying attention to the promises that our nation had said before the war started, during and after World War II. All lower-ranking personnel who have been dishonorably discharged must press, but we also guaranteed conflict with Russia and the Soviet Union because the Chinese issues with Russia had many different outcomes. We trained to keep the supply lines open, and World War II. Of course, I am so grateful for challenging our current president and upper chain of command because of the lack of foresight that other generals and commanders have had relating to earlier histories of what has occurred after World War II. Any way possible, I don't think so. Worded his knowledge of not listening to military personnel, only wanting to listen to the military advisors he picked when he took the oath of office as president of our nation. If they would listen to the China-resistant movements, we would not have a Communist China or Vietnam. They would been a guaranteed Allied 100 for the nation and Britain during World War II. With Ho Chi Minh, the French made connections with France. John F. Kennedy was alive and he would have multiple guaranteed oversight about Vietnam's diplomacy, about what was occurring in Vietnam in his lifetime as a young man. Granted, he wouldn't and was too young to serve. Beneficiary of had many relatives who had served in the military when he was a young man. Yes, he did serve the Senate proudly, but for the same reason they should have legal recourse to use in any way possible to get the point across and challenge their senior ranking officials and the Senate and House of Government. In the beginning they were the Russians in World War II supporting a communist nation. The Chinese had civil war with the communists. Unfortunately, they were at war with each other in turn. John F. Kennedy and Ho Chi Minh in World War II. Unlike what was in World War II, suppose our nation's citizens and military personnel had listened to his lower chain of command and the oversight they had during World War II, which would be ended, and a more significant effect of not having a war with Vietnam. Of these individuals I commend what they have done now. The Communist Party has successfully run China. Our current president would be still been a young man when Vietnam occurred means that he understood what was going on within Korea and Vietnam. The complex would be a completely distinctive. Look at what occurred in Japan. The current higher chain of command must be held accountable in the Supreme Court justice system. This mistake of the United Nations did not listen to the lower-ranking general in World War II about Ho Chi Minh, that if we did not support him in the situations that he was faced with from France and would eventually begin Ernest's worst nightmare, Vietnam. Unfortunately, all the individuals who were a part of the United Nations refused to pay attention to Vietnam. Unfortunately, they turned to the Communist Party, the Soviet Union and China after World War II because of all the bad. We were now listening to its lower chain of command after World War II. All these outcomes would be military advisors managed if the higher chain of command had listened to the lower chain of command. Even in World War II we promised but never followed through with our promises based on people. The reason I chose to vote Republican from now on, all lower chain of command has remained reinstated and praised for challenging the upper chain of command due to the foresight of another general in Afghanistan of all places during the ISIS-Afghanistan war with Russia. Again, we trained our enemy and did not back him up after we left the first time leaving them to defend themselves with the Soviet Union. How many outbreaks would be been specific? I'm sure Jasoc knew all about this before the war in Afghanistan and what occurred on 9/11 in addition to Donald Trump again with the Soviet Union going against Iraq and Afghanistan in the early 80s and 90s. Our nation did not follow the lower chain of command generals because of this first part of our nation's blunder suggestions. None of our commanders and lower-ranking upper chain of command should ever be dishonorable to our military's neglect. Our current president must be impeached along with all the scenes. Now we look at the Afghanistan and Iraq wars that we have been fighting for years because of 9/11. Who instigated 9/11? In the first place, in the 1980s, we trained the people that attacked our nation will allow them within our nation. Now the former president Teddy Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy, Bush Sr., Jr., and Donald Trump all had the foresight to ensure our security within our nation and made sure that there was continuity. Monster all military branches we backed out then as well. Instead of supporting and aiding further, we left without cause. Without further concern, we continue to do this where the higher chain of command and our current president does not listen to those lower chain of command, whether there are lower ranking generals, sergeants, or anyone who is brought this continuously to our attention within the upper chain command within our national security advisors. We should have listened to other generals about the individual we trained in Afghanistan while fighting Russia, whether using letter, verbal, and social media communication. Why should they be dishonorably discharged when the upper chain of command conveniently ignored their advice and endangered the personnel that we have trained and all the individuals that were still in Iraq and Afghanistan? People say he was a great diplomat. You would think within his knowledge of World War II through Korea and Vietnam as a child, and he would understand the military's perils, and within his political career your military advisors and the House and Senate must be held accountable for the endangerment of all lower chain of command military personnel and conveniently ignoring their advice. You're constantly going to continue to have military wonders if we don't start paying attention to our lower chain of command, and if we do not listen, our nation already said, he says, propaganda against us, whether through media or social media. This doesn't matter whether it's written or verbal or anything. Our enemies are always going to create propaganda against our nation regardless all. Because our nation will show to do what is correct. We do not illustrate how the upper chain command works. Chief refuses to listen to those the ground in are in charge of a company, whether it's a commander gen abnormal or other lower chain of command personnel who is out in the field, not in our homeland nation. Our worst enemies are the ones that we have taught and trained ourselves. And why do they are? Because we don't follow through with your promise that we told them in the beginning. As of right now knows our nation will go through because of the political unease in our nation, because of the withdrawal of Afghanistan. Our political party has created another new age, Korea, China and Vietnam. Not affiliated with these videos. I agree with what they say. Please look at them about World War II, the mistakes our nation has made amongst its military personnel, and how the lower chain command has again been disqualified and mistreated by the upper chain of command and our senior chief. We must make sure that our Democratic Party is held accountable for higher chain command mishandling the evacuation of Americans in Iraq and Afghanistan. Americans can't stand and allow the upper military command to misuse their authority to the lower chain of command. The commanders or lower-ranking military personnel should not be ablaze for illustrating their civil rights, even if the upper chain of command refuses to listen to their verbal and written information and any further communication. After that, whether it is social media, must consider necessary to ensure that their point provided by endangering the lower military personnel under our current President's procedures and evacuation of Iraq and Afghanistan. Anyway, possible. Click on the links below in the description. Click that like or dislike button and click on that bell button you want more videos. Please leave a good comment. Thank you. Please subscribe this way and you can get more videos. Thank you for watching.